Welcome back. I'm happy to announce you our next speaker. His name is Milos Belcevic. He will talk about learning and becoming experts in new domains as a product professional. Milos works as a product manager at TopTel and product owner at Clarivate. He helped build and scale various digital products in education, HR, healthcare, insurance, and other industries. He worked for clients ranging from MIT startups to large corporations. Before starting falling in love with the product, he worked in journalism and marketing, translated a few books, held a TEDx talk, had a publishing house, and also 2 to 3 failed startups. Milos, welcome.
Hey everyone, and thanks Maria for the intro. So as you already heard, we will talk about learning and why I believe that learning is one of the most important skills for a product professional. We'll start the discussion about PMs and new domains in general. Then we'll take a look at why this topic matters. Then we'll quickly cover product skills versus industry knowledge, and then look at learning as the most valuable skill you could have. After this intro part, we'll move on to the learning to learn portion. We'll start off with a bit less hands-on and more theoretical topics, such as finding the motivation to learn, lateral thinking, liminal thinking, and then we'll go more into things you are more able to apply in your job or have already applied potentially, such as doing product industry deep dives. We'll talk about one technique I really like called Feynman technique. And then lastly about a very interesting trend in not only product, but also knowledge work in general, building a second brain, note making versus note taking, digital gardening, and some interesting things. And as the final item, I would also like to touch upon managing the not learned. In the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. Please add your questions in the chat throughout the presentation. Maria will then read the questions. I'll try to answer. And of course, if you ask the question, you will have the opportunity to discuss more, maybe ask a sub-question, and confirm if I managed to answer your question. Okay, looking into PMs and new domains, I would just like to have a quick overview over our reality, the industry reality today, and benefits and pitfalls when it comes to shifting the domains as a product professional. During the presentation, I might combine product professional, PM, PO. All these titles are a bit fuzzy, and they also depend from organization to organization. But whether you're a PM, PO, associate, or even, I believe, any type of work, learning is a crucial skill for you. And in case I say PM or PO, please don't get offended. I mean that as an umbrella term for all the different product roles, which would be a good separate discussion in the topic itself. Reality nowadays is that the PMs will very likely work in multiple industries. PMs, when it comes to our career paths, still rarely follow some traditional path, and the job role itself is very diverse and not as strictly defined or even all the some other job roles. Plus the product as a discipline spread from software to almost any industry nowadays. And especially if you work as a consultant or a freelancer, then rapid switching of these industries would be your reality. So you might, even for weeks, work on a project in fintech, and then for a few months work on something very opposite. For instance, a yoga app or a mental health product or anything in between. I think it's also our reality that people don't stay within an organization for a multitude of years anymore. So that would also likely lead to you changing domains eventually. And even within a certain organization, although we are product, not project managers, a lot of things are project-based. So especially for larger organizations, you might work on different domains within a larger org. So the reality is that even if we discuss about software products, they exist in every sector today. Anderson from Anderson and Horowitz said software is eating the world. Like 10, 11 years ago, it has eaten it long ago. So I think it's our reality. That means that as a product professional working on a software product, you might be looking at agriculture, healthcare, insurance, gaming, really anything in between. Besides software products, furthermore, product thinking and product-led growth are becoming universal beyond software and tech. I like to make a parallel to Agile or Scrum, or even better, Agile as also another umbrella term, something that originated years ago in regards to software, now is a reality for education, for manufacturing, for many different industries. The same comes with product thinking. Product thinking is also, I would say, historically tied to software products. But now we look at products at any industry. We could look into education, where your product would be the curriculum. We could look at banks, which is an interesting case because they have a product as software, but they also have a product as financial package, which is also a product of sorts. So this product thinking is now getting universal as well, which again is an argument for the case that you will be switching domains. There are some benefits to this and there are some pitfalls. Benefits I try to group for professionals, so for PMs, for organizations, and for products. For us as product professionals, I believe there are benefits career-wise, although also being a specialist within a certain field gives you an advantage. Being sort of a T-shaped person and having different experiences from different domains will also make you more hireable. Whether you're looking into changing your full-time job or you're looking into consultancy, this wider experience in terms of domains you worked within will be favorable. Besides this, I think changing the domain keeps you on the edge and keeps you sharp, because sometimes if we have been working in a single domain for years and years, we become a bit lazy, or like at least intellectually lazy, and think we know everything there is, and we never know everything there is. But when you're new in a domain, you have a fresh set of eyes, you have curiosity, and you stay sharp. For organizations, there are multiple benefits. One example is innovative perspectives. A person who worked in fintech will bring best practices and some insights into a new industry and vice versa. For instance, people who worked in gaming or people who used gamification as such are now implementing this best practice everywhere. So you will see gamification even in some financial apps where you have some rewards, streaks, different incentives for you to, for instance, save money or use a certain financial product. So all of this sort of originated with these perspectives applied to new domains. Also, driving improvements, working in different domains, you will be working in different organizations, you will learn different best practices and be a driver for improvements, whether you are consulting or working full-time in-house. Sometimes these improvements are more drastic or more heavy. If you're in-house, as a freelancer, you're more advising usually, but in both cases there are improvements and value to your clients and or employers. Finally, for products, which we already mentioned, there are benefits. There is this so-called cross-contamination. So you will see gamification elements in a fintech product. You would see a lot of gamification in education products and platforms. That's also a huge trend. And then also fresh eyes lead to better products. There are also some pitfalls as well. So although I'm very keen on both personally, because I'm very curious and I like learning new stuff, and professionally, I think the diversity of perspective will bring value in every sense. There are obviously pitfalls to this as well. For PMs or for us as product professionals, you might risk not necessarily becoming a jack of all trades, but at least being seen as one. Maybe more old-fashioned organizations or employers might prefer you not to have been worked in like 10 projects in 5 years in 6 domains. They would like to see some consistency, which also has its arguments as well. And also if you want to really specialize in a field, then of course it's good to focus on that domain. I think it's good to strike a balance there. Those, as I mentioned, keeping you on the edge and being sharp, it takes a toll. And that intensive learning, 24/7 diving into a new domain will take its toll, especially if you're on short-term hard deadlines. If you need to absorb a vast amount of knowledge on a short period, you will be stressed out. And also that could lead to burnout, and that could lead to many other problems. For organizations, there's this potential of missing out on deep or deeper expertise. This is especially relevant for some, although every field has its complexity, or at least this is my opinion, but we would have to agree that some fields are more complex or more hard to get into. So working in like biotech or even legal or even fintech, which are, in my opinion, less hard than biotech, you need to have this deeper expertise. And if you are switching the domain very often, you will not be able to get it. and then the organization is missing out on that. There is a potential pitfall for organizations in terms of hiring, or whether full-time or as consultants, that there are experts everywhere, meaning that it can seem that maybe I worked on 2 projects in fintech and now I'm a fintech expert. No, I'm not. So sometimes it can be hard to sort of triage for professionals at the level you need them, also in the context of their industry experience. But of course, that is solved through their own processes and hiring and so on. But those would be the main pitfalls. There's also pitfalls for products. This cross-contamination that I mentioned, which I think is super great and gives a lot of value to the products and to industry. The other end of it is commonplace thinking and some banalities. I mentioned gamification multiple times. Sometimes this can be banal or add 0 value to your product. There are some edge cases where it doesn't make sense, but people can just be like, yeah, let's gamify everything. So let's just do it without thinking with this, within this certain context. Also, some core innovation needs intimate knowledge. And this is tying back to being an expert in a certain field. You really need to work for years and to learn a lot to be able to, of course, improve your product. And especially if you're speaking about not incremental, but radical innovation or core innovation. For that, you would really need to dive deep. Of course, this can be mitigated through having subject matter experts in organization as well and collaborating with them, but we will handle that part later on through managing the unlearned. So why this matters was the question I wanted to start with, but I realized that if we go through this situation and our reality, that itself would be the answer before we ask this question. So based on everything we covered, I think it does matter, and learning is important both for us as professionals, for our organizations, and for our products. Just a quick run through product skills versus industry knowledge. What's a priority? What is the nature of product versus industry knowledge? There's attendees from all walks of life. Some of you may think it's very banal to discuss like what are product skills, but at the same time, there are aspiring product professionals here as well. So I just wanted to sort of go through what I see as industry knowledge versus product skills and what would be the priority. So talking about product skills, sometimes it's compared to like hard skills when you have engineers and things they do. That's like hard skill. For product, it can be backlog management, user research, product discovery, whatnot. I think that a product skill is actually also learning. And then industry knowledge is what you learn. So that's sort of value or some sort of meta value that you need to have to be able to build a successful product in that domain. So many times, good product professionals were actually experts in certain fields. For some products, you need hardcore experts. If you're talking about biotech or health care or things like that. Many times you could find even doctors, MDs, as either product-oriented people or subject matter experts. But in many times, expert in a field started working on products in that field. So industry knowledge is very valuable. And there's, of course, this difference, like what is product skills? This is general, tools of trade, best practices, your skills and knowledge. And then there is industry knowledge, which will give you a context in which you can apply your skills to build a better product. What is a priority here? I think that's a great question. And I would not answer it myself. Personally, I think learning is one of the most valuable skills. But then a person way smarter than me had a few cents on this topic. So this is Marty Kagan, author of very famous books such as Empowered, also founder of Silicon Valley Product Group, thought leader in every sense in product. He said in his book Empowered that hiring a good product manager with sharp learning skills is better than hiring exclusively for domain expertise. And also in the blog post about the role of domain experience, he said that 80% of the skills and talents of a product manager are applicable across different types of products. I think this also answers the question on priorities, the question on why learning matters. Being a good product manager is your, of course, advantage and your main job. Being a sharp learner, quick learner, curious person is advantage in itself as well. And many times it can be beneficial for you more than, let's say, domain expertise from previous experience. This, of course, does not mean that domain expertise is not relevant. It is very relevant in some products more than in the others. But learning is your good friend, and that is why we're discussing learning to learn. Additionally, sometimes if you're expert in a field, you might believe that you know everything there is to know and stop listening to your users and market, which then is a pitfall in itself when it comes to being a domain expert. So some people, even Marty Kagan as well in another blog post, they argue that there are even downsides to being expert within a field, and they would actually prefer someone who is familiar with the field but does not have these biases based on their previous knowledge. This was the quick run through the why this matters, and now we go into learning to learn, which I think is more practical part of the talk. When it comes to learning, motivation is one of the most important factors. In my previous lives, I studied languages and I was language teacher as well. And there were researches that learning a new language will be extremely influenced by a learner's motivation. Besides being exposed to language, that is why if you move to a new country, you will most likely learn the language much faster and much better. Of course, you're exposed, but also you're much more motivated than a hobby learner. The same goes with learning in general. So there are few topics I would like to cover there. and some personal tips that I have used, as well as some theory here. So I like to look at learning as a challenge. I'm a bit competitive person, so for me it makes sense to sort of want to conquer a new domain and prove to myself that I can manage this, I can learn this, I can, now I get it. That's a good motivational factor. On the other hand, and this would tie to the bullet number 4, if a challenge is too high, it is good to acknowledge difficult feelings, but don't dwell on them. So it's okay to say, I'm so frustrated with this. I will never understand private insurance in America, or I will never get this. It's okay. Do not ignore your feelings because they are real, but also don't fall into them. So look at it as a challenge and say, okay, I feel I'm very frustrated now. This is so hard, but let's have a break and continue tomorrow. There is also theory on mercenaries versus missionaries. It's more related to teams and the way we work. Mercenaries are typically consultants or teams that are here to do the job and then get paid for the job and do their part, and that's it. Missionaries are people who have a higher motivation. They believe in the mission, they believe in the cause, and they want to make a change. I think if we look at learning as a goal, it's much better to be a missionary than mercenary, in the sense that I can look at it as me not being here just to learn some basic stuff in legal or intellectual property or fintech, gaming, whatever. Rather, I like to look at it as a mission. So I see the benefits of this industry, the overall importance, and look at it as a field that I'm not only curious about, but I see the benefits for me, for organization, to get better and understand more and learn more. If you're focused on this process and this value, rather than just achieving a certain goal, you will likely be much more motivated. There's, of course, a great book by Daniel Pink called Drive. It's also related to work, but learning is work as well. When you have autonomy, mastery, and I forgot the third item on the spot, you will be much more motivated to do your job. Look at learning in the same way. Organize your time, manage your goals, and approach it in that way. Acknowledging difficult feelings, we already mentioned. And then finally, and this is a bit of gamification as well, make sure your goals are small enough that you achieve incremental improvements towards the bigger goal. So if my goal is, okay, you need to learn everything there is about real estate in Germany and their laws and regulations in rentals and selling of the properties. That's a crazy goal. That's a hard goal to achieve. And I will be constantly demotivated and frustrated because there's so much to do and I've done just a little. Rather than doing that, make your learning curriculum or set some smaller goals. So maybe learn a few laws, learn about market in general, and then celebrate all your wins and all your learnings. And then within weeks, or depending on the domain, more or less time, you'll be amazed that you have actually achieved a lot over the time. but you were not frustrated because there was always so much to do and so very little that you've done. There is lateral thinking, which is theory on thinking in itself. And it comes to different principles. You can read more about it. It's written by Bono, who is also, as a bonus, author of Mind Maps in Serbian Mape Uma, which I highly recommend. And you may have used this tool to learn in practice. Lateral thinking is applying new and innovating thinking or solutions to certain problems. The whole process has multiple steps. They also have like a random word that should trigger your new thinking. But basically, it's just, when you boil it down, in my opinion, it's challenging the status quo, thinking outside of the box and thinking creatively. So as you learn, think about what items from your previous knowledge you can tie this to, what's different, and then what's the overall context and how this all fits in. It will help you a lot versus looking at even these like rentals in Germany or insurance in America, agriculture in Serbia, renewable energy in South Africa. If you look at this as an island, it will be very weird, very hard to address. If you look at it on a larger perspective with some knowledge that you may have that you can relate to, either saying, oh, this is like in Germany, or this is not at all like in Serbia, or saying like this works similar to a certain other industry. Having these nodes and connections in your knowledge will help you learn much better. Another thing is liminal thinking, and it's also more of a philosophy. There's a book on it by Dave Gray. They have 6 principles, 9 practices. When you boil it down, it comes to being open-minded and evolving yourself. And I just took a few notes on both principles and practices that I think would be beneficial for your learning, but also for you as a person and as a professional. I think the question of bias is very relevant. When you work on products, you work on people's experiences, you work on meaningful, you're materializing some value system and some framework and influencing people's lives. That can sound dramatic, but in reality, you're doing that, especially if you're working on a larger project for multiple users, and or if you're working in an industry such as like health tech or fintech or yeah. So it's very important to be open-minded. Some of the principles are that our beliefs are models, that these models are created, and that created beliefs create blind spots. In the context of learning, and this also ties to lateral thinking, do not believe in status quo. Rephrase, rethink, reiterate, see what works and what doesn't work and why. That will help you not only learn the term, but also understand the underlying principles of a domain you're diving into. There are practices such as asking questions, disrupting the routine, and this is similar to the previous topic, and making these connections. The more connections you make, the stronger your knowledge will be. There is now, coming from this theoretical portion more into hands-on, best practices, suggestions, and more practical things you could implement like today in your day-to-day work. I call this product industry deep dives. Basically, and I think most of you have already done it. It's one of my favorite things to do, but I will cover it also in the sense of learning. You should always become an intensive user, using different apps. For instance, if you're working on cost tracker or finance tracker, download a lot of apps, try them out, track your costs, try to track it in spreadsheets, see what there is in other markets. Really become obsessed with this, not only product, but in this sense, with this industry, with this domain. Look at yourself as a subject matter expert. So of course we can, but we cannot become an expert or real expert very quickly. But don't just be informed on situation in real estate in Spain or Germany. Try to become an expert and try to approach it systematically and be motivated to learn a lot about this domain. Some of the things I already mentioned, and these are usually steps I do regularly. First of all, download the apps, try out the products that exist in this domain. Sign up for free trials, check out books, sign up for newsletters, blogs. Depending on your domain, go on Discord, go on Twitter, see where the domain expertise is, as well as your users. Users in the sense of the product, domain expertise in the sense of today's topic, learning. But it goes hand in hand. Sometimes even enroll in programs. I took a simple bookkeeping course just to better understand the challenges a person working in accounting would face using a module that we are building in our CRM. Shadow people, shadow your colleagues. That's another great thing. If you're not that obsessed and willing to take a course in your free time or work time or whatever, you can always shadow people. So try and talk with them, see how their day looks, what are their pain points, what are pain points of this domain. Join communities I mentioned on Discord, Meetup, Slack groups, Twitter. I think like usually crypto is more on Discord, Twitter side. If you're working in biotech, I guess you should check like more official groups or boards and alliances of experts. For instance, doctors and things like that. Of course, all of this depends on your context. And finally, visualize. I think visualization will help you both on product end and on learning end. If you take something very abstract like renewable energy in South Africa or rentals in Germany, in Berlin or wherever, it's like very weird and hard to address. If you visualize it, then you should go through a day of your user and then tie it to this domain. So for instance, I would literally see like, okay, I'm moving to Berlin. How do you find an apartment? What are the places I check? What are some laws, regulations, contracts? All this is very product oriented, but it will at the same time help you learn about the domain, because all of a sudden something that is almost a mind game or a thought experiment, me moving to Berlin, led me to learn about all the necessary documents I need to gather to be able to apply for a mortgage or to be able to sign a contract with my landowner. So this visualization seems banal, seems like something people do by default. In my experience, they don't. If you do, awesome. If not, try it, because it's really like super, super helpful and makes it so much easier and practical, and could not recommend it more. There's one more technique. It's called the Feynman technique. It's named by this great scientist. He is Nobel for physics winner. He was a drummer. He was like musician. He was super, super all-sided person. Besides being an amazing expert and one of the most influential thinkers of the previous century, for sure. There are three important things here and 4 steps in the technique itself. So the first thing is understanding versus knowing. If we are talking about you as product professional in a new domain, just knowing does not add that much value. So just knowing there is some documentation needed for renting apartment in Germany does not give that much value as much as understanding of why it's needed, how you can do it, can it be e-signed or whatnot. The same is with learning. If you just know some big words or buzzwords or topics, that doesn't mean much. You really need to understand the concept. So this technique is oriented towards understanding, and understanding is the best learning there is. Step by step, you first identify a concept. Whether it's a complex concept, the technique would work great. Whether it's a simple or at first sight simple concept, it will also work great. A pitfall in my understanding, and this is why I would always recommend doing this technique either formally or running in your head. With time, you don't need to necessarily sit down and write. You can just go through it. Sometimes things seem simple, but there is much more to it that you maybe don't necessarily understand. So there's learning potential. So I don't think like there's no such thing as simple product, simple domain. On the other hand, by default, those complex things you will need to break down. So try it out for both things that seem simple in your new domain and for things that seem complex, and see the results. Once you have identified your concept, the step 2 is to explain it to a child. Try and literally explain it to a person who has no clue on the domain, who has no clue on big words, who is like curious and open to hear, but does not have this knowledge we expect that we all have, or we don't want to admit that we don't know something. Try and explain this concept in a very simple manner. In the beginning, I suggest that you literally start and do it on a piece of paper or on your computer, write the title, and then do a paragraph or 2 or 3 on this concept in simple words. Once you've done it, review and simplify. Go through it. Is there something that is not clear? Are there some vague words or expert terms or items that are not like totally understandable? Go through it again and then rephrase. The trick here is that explaining it, you will actually understand it. You will also uncover areas that you don't know and you may have thought that you knew. Rinse and repeat until you're happy with it. Sounds simple. Not a lot of people do it, but I highly, highly recommend it. As a bonus, and that is also a nice way to learn new concepts. There's a technique called 5 whys. It's usually used in lean manufacturing and lean principles, where you do so-called post-mortem, which sounds dark. I like to call it root cause analysis. So when you face the problem, breakdown in your system, you do a 5 why. And that's literally asking like, what happened? Why? And then 5 times. If you do 5 whys for a concept, so like, I need to sign this contract. Why? You will uncover these areas that you may not have known previously. There's this final topic that I will just touch upon, and it's called Building a Second Brain. There's a book called Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte. I will recommend it for you if it's a new concept. There's also a great community, Nest Labs, on note making versus note taking. And for me personally, this second brain helped a lot when working for a new client or on a new job or learning a new domain. Simply explained, it's a way to use technology to keep track of information, to make it searchable, accessible, and applicable for when you need it, so you find it easier. I read that 30% of time for knowledge workers is spent on looking for information, and I think in 1 or 2/3 we don't even manage to find it successfully. So being organized in your note making will be super useful for you. Check out Building a Second Brain. Check out some note-taking methods such as Zettelkasten, where you have this librarian approach where you index different concepts and tie them to each other. And definitely check out Nest Labs as well. There are multiple note-taking apps, approaches. You should find what works best for you, but it's like my super secret weapon, so I would highly recommend. These are, I forgot to switch the slide. So I think a good step is to understand the type of a note taker you are. Just Google archetype note takers or note taking apps for archetypes, Nest Labs. There's a blog post on that. And some tools that I would recommend are Notion, Obsidian, Rome Research as my go-to apps. Managing the not learned. This is just a few tips from my experience. One thing is to be aware of and not afraid of admitting that there are things you don't know, especially because we're not experts in the field, we are new to the field. And sometimes when you are new to a role or new to a client or a team, you have this need to sort of pretend that I know everything. Instead of that, I think you will even gain more respect to literally say, I don't know this, can you explain? And don't be afraid to ask. That would be the best way to manage what you don't know, personally and professionally. And when it comes to organizations or you as a professional, you can always augment what you don't know with a subject matter expert. So in many cases, there will be people whose job is their expertise in a field of like DNA sequencing or DNA engineering or things that there's no way you could get into unless it's like PhD. So don't be afraid to say don't know, ask for help, be open to learning, and also collaborate with people who have the knowledge and can help you out. We have covered those, and one more time. I think the last one was like really be honest about what you don't know, and don't be afraid to ask. Sometimes it's scary. Sometimes people would say like, "Oh, this is a stupid question." Don't say it's a stupid question. Just say like, "Oh, could you explain this to me?" Or "I'm not sure I get this." Okay, speaking of questions, thanks for the attention. I was trying to cover in time, so we have 10 more minutes. Please feel free to ask any questions you might have, or someone maybe already asked in chat.